The transfer window may be over, but that does not stop us from talking about the latest Arsenal news. We're here this morning with the first episode returning of the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning throughout the season, with the transfer window, of course, now closed. If you've been making this show a part of your morning routines throughout the summer, worry not, because we have got a show for you continuing, and your morning routines need not be changed, because we will be continuing to join you every single morning throughout the course of the season, of course, all the way up until the January transfer window, of which the Arsenal transfer show will return in December, as we look ahead to that period. But of course, normal reactions, normal format, news, and then you in part two. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Angela, Paul, Dan, Tucker Boy, Paul, Black Shine. We've got Carlton and Logo. We've got Barry and our Silky. We've got Matt G, Jose, Paul, Rob. Thank you to you all for tuning in. It is incredibly appreciated. And, the channel continues to grow, and the community continues to strengthen. And if you could ever be so kind, drop a like on the video. Yesterday, we did indeed reach 1,000 likes on the show, which is incredible as always, especially considering it was the day after a disappointing defeat. It was on a Sunday, and I knew the mood was low. So thank you for those very kind words and a very kind support as always. Please do subscribe if you're new and join us on this continuing journey throughout the course of a brand new season. Opportunities, of course, through doing this show have become more frequent, and in a very fortunate situation about going to Arsenal game stuff now. But yesterday I was given the opportunity to hop into the TalkSport studio to join Kwaku and Slim and Joe to have a chat about all things football in the afternoon. We got into some very interesting conversations and some very interesting chats about some different things. We got into Havertz versus Osimhen, and that was a really interesting part. You can actually watch back that specific clip on the TalkSport YouTube channel as well, but I recommend you go and have a look at some of the clips that there was. What you do when you kind of throw yourself into the Lions Den, goodness me, the comment sections are brutal. Absolutely brutal. I sometimes don't. Yesterday, I'll tell you what, I'm really good at kind of reading through comments of the channel, replying to you as much as I can. I didn't have the energy yesterday. I've said defeat, and I know it was a draw, but it felt like a defeat. After the draw on Saturday, I just didn't have the energy to kind of reply to a lot of yesterday's comments, if any. I think I replied to like one or two. I just didn't have it. I told you on the show, I said sometimes you just need to take yourself away from it. You just need to take yourself and detach yourself from the sport, from football, because it's better for your mental health. And sometimes, I haven't done it very often, but yesterday I did that with a comment section. I had to just detach myself yesterday. But we're back into the full swing of things, of course, from today. Let's go into today's stories, though, and we start with a roundup of all the Premier League action over the course of the weekend. Every single team in the Premier League scored yesterday and on Saturday, except for one. Manchester United. We'll get there. Arsenal drawing 1-1 with Brighton, as we know. Brentford beating Southampton 3-1. Everton capitulating in the last few moments of their game. 2-0 up in the 87th minute. 3-2 defeat come the full-time whistle. Ipswich 1-1 against Fulham. Emile Smith-Rowe, of course, starting. Iwobi involved as well. And Reece Nelson will be getting into that team soon. But Adama Traore scoring in that game maybe being something of an obstacle for Reece Nelson there. Leicester City losing at home to Aston Villa, recovering from that defeat against Arsenal. Nottingham Forest drawing 1-1 against Wolves. Forest looking a lot better this season, still unbeaten in the first three games. West Ham United lost to the inevitable Erling Haaland and Manchester City. And then yesterday's games, Chelsea drawing with Crystal Palace. You can spend, but it won't guarantee you get wins at home. Newcastle beating Tottenham Hotspur. And then in the late kickoff, the quote-unquote biggest game in the world saw Liverpool absolutely batter Manchester United at Old Trafford. Casemiro, dearie me, what an awful footballer Casemiro is turning out to be, it seems, for Manchester United. And it's unsurprising that he was substituted for a player that's never made a Premier League appearance at half-time. Really disappointing display from him, but ultimately a bit of a reality check, I think, for Man United as well. And also, I do think that we're in a situation with Liverpool that you have to recognise the challenge that they are going to be still this season. On a Slot has been a very good appointment for them. And in an early stage, the suggestions were they had an easy start to the season. I've certainly been looking at the easy start to the campaign that they've had in terms of their fixtures compared to Arsenal. But of course, this was one of their first tests, if you like. And they've passed it with flying colours. Luis Diaz and Mohamed Salah looking very, very good indeed. Ten Hag, though, I said it on TalkSport yesterday, I'd sack him now. If I was a Manchester United fan, if I was in charge of that club, I would have sacked him at the end of last season. I would sack him now. It is the best time that you've got to sack Erik ten Hag. I would I would sack him now, without question. Without question. Moving forward, though, and the fallout from Declan Rice's red card has continued. We've seen John Terry reply to Declan Rice's Instagram post saying the worst decision ever. We've seen former referee Mark Halsey in his newspaper column talk about how it was a really bad decision by Chris Kavanagh. Overall, it feels like the general consensus from those that have got their head screwed on in regards to football mainly have seen and agree that this was just a ridiculous decision to send off Declan Rice, to ruin a game of football and ultimately cost Arsenal 2 points. I did watch our good friend of the show, Dan Potts' video yesterday talking about the game. I think it's incredibly harsh the way in which, Dan, you've analysed yesterday's fixture for me personally, talking about obviously how we didn't lose the game because of the red. Oh, sorry, we didn't draw the game because of the red card. I'm sorry, but if you can't answer the question of do you think that we would have gone on to win with 11 men on the field, of course, then the red card was the reason we didn't win yesterday. Yes, we could still have won with the chances we created, but the fact of the matter is 11 against 11, Arsenal win that game comfortably win that game. So I did feel as though that there's a rhetoric building from yesterday that we're going to kind of overly focus on kind of the missed chances. Yes, there are chances in Saka and Havertz that should have been taken, but we were robbed yesterday. We deserve to win. I keep saying yesterday. Whenever I say yesterday, just assume I mean Saturday. We were robbed on Saturday. Utterly, entirely robbed on Saturday. And that is the message from the game. It's the temptation to build up this negative view of Arsenal already at such an early stage of the season, say we're not good enough, finishing ain't good enough, etc., etc. No, Saturday was all about the officiating. Saturday was all about being robbed. It's as simple as that. Moving forwards, and Rob Holding is training alone at Crystal Palace as his misery in South London continues. Oliver Glasner, actually speaking in a press conference, was asked about why Rob Holding is, still at the club and isn't in the squads, and effectively said he's training alone right now. He knows why, but I'm not going to talk about it publicly. So it seems all is not well when it comes to Rob Holding and his time with Crystal Palace. Arsenal, of course, getting over £1 million for his sale a couple of summers ago. Not good for Rob Holding. Meanwhile, Alan Nixon reporting on his Patreon that Sam Tickle, the goalkeeper that was linked to Arsenal, Wigan Athletic goalkeeper, 22-year-old England youth international, he actually decided against moving to Arsenal. Of course, Arsenal sounded out the goalkeeper about becoming their third choice. And unsurprisingly, Sam Tickle decided to turn down that approach because he'd rather be a starting figure, even playing in League One at the moment. Because from my perspective, at least, you can't blame a guy who's playing week in, week out, even if it's an approach from Arsenal, because you're never going to play. And at 22 years of age, you need to be playing. So I don't blame the guy for turning down that move whatsoever. Omar Rekik, meanwhile, has had his Arsenal contract terminated. He has left the club now permanently. He'll be looking for an opportunity to join a club as soon as feasibly possible. Of course, we saw Omar Rekik in pre-season. He actually was the instigator of Bournemouth's equaliser in the game against Arsenal in pre-season. And it was always at 22 years of age. It was just entirely expected that Omar Rekik was going to be leaving the club. And that has now happened, of course. Mikel Merino, the update and the latest kind of feeling around him is there's suggestions on social media on the weekend of a 6 to 8 week timeline. I asked a couple of questions around this, and the feel I got back was that it could be closer to the 6 than to the 8, which obviously is positive. With there being 2 international breaks in the time period that Mikel Merino is going to be out for, that obviously does help Arsenal somewhat, but his absence is going to be felt immediately. With Declan Rice suspended for the North London derby, Mikel Merino would have been an immediate addition to the team to really help with that. We're still waiting for kind of the confirmation of the specificity of the injury. Mikel Arteta suspected it could have been a fracture of a shoulder injury, but we're still getting it. I actually managed to hear from Mikel Merino himself in the mix zone of being asked a question by some Spanish journalists about how long he was going to be out for, but he didn't know at the time. He just simply said, I'm not sure at the moment. So, yeah, it's still very much out in kind of this area of uncertainty, but I was kind of given the sense of it being, more towards the 6th than the 8th. But again, it's still very much up in the air, and we're still waiting for full confirmation on this. But maybe a slight glimmer of optimism there. We'll wait and see. And our main story, of course, is on Jurrien Timber. We didn't really get to talk about this yesterday. He came off with an issue during the game against Brighton. Mikel Arteta confirming after the game, however, that it was just cramp, and that was confirmed later on the day as well. Not an injury for Jurrien Timber, which, of course, is a really big positive for Arsenal. We don't need to lose any more players, especially going into that North London derby. So Jurrien Timber should hopefully be fine and ready for that North London derby after the international break, as hopefully maybe will Gabriel Jesus. We're still waiting to find out about him. Raheem Sterling will, of course, be in the squad. Neto will be in the squad as well. Hopefully we can get some players back that we have been missing, and some injections of quality into the team in the form of Jesus and Sterling as well, which is obviously going to be really important. The most quality that you can get, however, when surfing the net is NordVPN, which brings you the safety and security that you need whilst online, giving you those pesky trackers, just giving them the goodbye, that you are not welcome here. Because we've got Nord protecting us on our tablets, on our mobiles, or indeed our laptops as well. You can get an extra 4 months thrown in free on your 2-year deal with a significant discount courtesy of NordVPN by going to nordvpn.com/Gooner to get yourself that significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan. And if you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. Who can say any fairer than that? Now, of course, with it being Monday, we know that today's prize on Football Prizes does run out today. So the last chance is for you to win a signed Dennis Bergkamp shirt. And as of right now, there are 4 tickets. Just 4 left. Link down in the description. UK only, of course. Get those last 4 tickets before they go. Can't say I didn't tell you. Can't say I didn't remind you. Can't say I haven't warned you. That is the last one. So let's go to part 2 now, and your questions right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show. You know the drill by now, where we tackle your questions and more in the chat box. Can I just take a second to look at the top left-hand corner of my screen? You can't see it, but I can. It tells me how many people are currently watching. There's over 200 of you listening on Twitter, which is great. Always tune in on YouTube, though, as I tell you. If you're listening on Twitter, and I've told you before, listen on YouTube. It's the only place to watch this show where you can get involved in the chat box and ask questions. There's over 1,200 people watching on YouTube, which, considering the fact that this is a brand new, obviously, Arsenal news show, the transfer window's done. I know that there's such an emphasis on transfers. The loyalty of this community, the legendary actions of you lot continues to astound me. So thank you. And if you could be ever so kind to drop a like on the video, that would be incredibly appreciated. Right, let's jump into the chat and tackle as many of your questions as we can in the next 15 to 20 or so minutes, shall we? If you use the little capital Q, it does help those questions stand out that much more and makes it easier for me to spot them. Just give you a little bit of a tip of how you can probably get your questions asked more likely. Chris, we start off with yours. Hi, Tom. Genuine question, as I'm unsure, are Arsenal able to appeal the Rice red card at all, or is it because it is a second yellow we can't? Chris, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm going to say that obviously that's not definitive, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think we can, Chris. No, I don't think we can appeal it because it is a second yellow, not a straight red. Tech RSA says, Tom, do you think that we can explore the option of Timber in the midfield and leave Calafiori at left back? This is something that's been suggested. We actually talked a little bit about it on TalkSport yesterday. Quakey was saying that, he's not a fan of this, same as myself. And I can't see Arsenal needing to, put him into midfield. For the Spurs game, what I would do if Jesus is back, I'd bring Jesus into starting 11. I'd move Havertz into midfield and play with Partey, Havertz, Nørdegaard as my midfield 3, and then have Jesus, Saka, and probably Martinelli on the left-hand side for that game, bringing Trossard off the bench. Trossard didn't have the most amazing game from the start. Continually, he might be frustrated about the fact that, he's not starting enough games, but he just continues to deliver when he comes off the bench, in games. And I think he's still good from the start in games, but I think from the bench, obviously, his impact seems to be that much greater. And Sterling is also now going to be in the squad, so it's interesting to see if he has something to say in this game in the North London derby. What a start to his Arsenal career it could be if he is indeed very instrumental and getting Arsenal what they need. Luke says, I'm not going to like the stream today, Tom. I'm upset that you've spent more time talking about Manchester United. Luke, I'm afraid that's what you get. Luke being our resident Manchester United supporter in the chat, when you lose the biggest game of the country, we're going to talk about it, mate. So if you're not going to like the video, that's all I can say. That's all I can say. What can I say? That's what you come here for. Thomas says, the really infuriating issue following the wrongful fact that the second yellow to Rice is that the laws of the game are so pathetic that Rice has no right to appeal. It's archaic. I think you're absolutely right, my friend. Absolutely right. Trent says, what number do you think Sterling will take? I think he'll take the 10. I don't know that, but I think he'll take the 10 for this season and just this season, because he obviously will be giving that 10 back. So I would be surprised if he doesn't have the number 10 shirt for this season, considering the profile, considering who Sterling is. I think that he will take the number 10 shirt. Jamil says, I know it's only 3 games in, but are you already a little concerned that we have already dropped 2 points? I don't imagine City or even Liverpool will drop too many. Jamil, of course it's a concern. Of course it's a concern. And when you look at the monotony of Erling Haaland and Man City against West Ham, when you look at how impressive Liverpool looked at Old Trafford, of course it's a concern, Jamil. Am I concerned about Arsenal? No, I'm not, because I've seen the first 3 games of the season and I think we've done well. I think we've deserved to win all 3 games. And I think that we've obviously done a really good job in getting the points that we've got so far. The rhetoric that Arsenal yesterday, being wasteful, we had the chances to win it, but we didn't. For me, it's madly overwhelmed, overridden by the refereeing. Arsenal win that game comfortably 11 against 11. And that's what we should be taking away from that game, that we're absolutely... If we're Arsenal, if the rhetoric or the focus of yesterday, or I keep saying yesterday, if Saturday's game is that Arsenal were the reason why they didn't win, and Arsenal are the number one reason why we didn't win that game, when for me, the number one reason Arsenal win on Saturday was because, obviously, of being robbed and being given the humongous disadvantage of going down to 10 men wrongfully, then that is only going to breed more misery, more negativity, more scrutiny. When the fact of the matter is that Arsenal started this season well. They've already picked up points in the game. Of course, they dropped last season in Aston Villa, but of course, they managed to beat Brighton twice last season. So that's a game in which, sadly, has turned over in the wrong way, but we all know it shouldn't have done. Dancing Bear says, hi, Tom. Can we safely say now that money are restricted on how much we could spend, taking into consideration we had to sell to buy and not buying a striker? I don't think so, no, because Arsenal's approach to the window was through choice. Arsenal decided to be sustainable in that window. They decided to bring in players after selling players because they felt that the window just simply was not a strong enough example of bringing in players for however much money they would have costed. They weren't convinced by Osimhen. They weren't convinced by Gyökeres. They weren't convinced by other forwards that they could have brought in. And they felt as though it was better instead to have a summer where they kind of sustained things, moved out Deadwood for really good selling fees, and then brought in some impactful players on short-term deals like with Sterling, for instance, but also adding quality to the team with Mikel Merino and also with Calafiori. So it's nothing to do with restrictions. It's nothing to do with PSR. Arsenal would have chosen not to spend certain amounts of money because they felt that they weren't convinced by the options that are on the table. So no, nothing to do with restrictions. And that's to my understanding as well. It's not a case of like estimating this or guessing this. My knowledge from what I'm told from people I've spoken to is that PSR is not a concern for Arsenal at this moment in time. Wilson says, why on earth do you think that Havertz is better than Osimhen? Are you mad, Tom? Bloody hell. Wilson, it's just very obvious that Havertz is better for us than Osimhen is. If you want to go and listen to my full explanation, there is a video on the TalkSport YouTube channel. The headline of that video is Tom Cantor makes crazy claim that he would rather have Kai Havertz as a striker over Victor Osimhen. So you can go and watch the full 15-minute clip, or 10-minute clip, sorry, over on the TalkSport YouTube channel. Paul says, Tom, we have enough cover. Why not introduce Timber to the left midfield role for the Spurs game? Can also be a stronger left for us. What do you think? Calafiori behind him as well. A lot of people seemingly want to see Timber given an opportunity to play in midfield. I'm not sure I'd be trialing it in a North London derby. I don't think that's the way to go. Maybe something for that Bolton game we could try just to see how it goes, but I wouldn't be trialing it in a North London derby. Jason says, do you think referees should be given post-match interviews like players and managers? Absolutely. Knowledge says, Tom, I noticed that just about every home game, the team was walked out wearing a white jacket with the black badging. Was there some sort of campaign going around I didn't hear about? No, this is actually a new, you'll be surprised to hear this. This is a brand new piece of Arsenal merch, which is titled ZNE, that I hadn't come across before. It's already sold out in medium to triple XL. I was actually going to grab the jacket because it looked very nice, but sadly missed out on it. Was not quick enough to get my hands on it. But yeah, it's a very nice jacket. And it's a new bit of merch. You'll be surprised to know that's come out of the Arsenal foot. I think it's really nice, but yeah, sadly sold out from medium through to triple XL. I think there's still small though available if you are indeed a small. I think there's also women's and kids versions too. Voos says, Tom, just catching up now, but wanted to say big up yourself for getting on TalkSport. It's a jungle in the comments. Look after yourself. I think look, this is part of the parcel of it. You know, it's. If you're going to jump there, if you're going to take the offers, and I was very appreciative to get the call up to TalkSport yesterday, you know, you take the rough with the smooth. This, you know, you take the rough, and the comment section is always, and plus I'm commenting on other clubs as well, not just Arsenal. So I empathise with fans of other clubs because I'm an Arsenal fan at the end of the day. If I'm having my say on Newcastle, if I'm having my say on Brighton, if I'm having my say on Man United, and fans of those clubs disagree with me, they're absolutely entitled to disagree with me. You know, and I to be honest, you know, it would be difficult to have that same debate with them. I'd certainly take it on and I'd talk about it and have a discussion, but I'm not going to be able to debate them in the same way that I can debate Arsenal fans, you know. But it was a really good conversation, I think, about a number of things. I stand by what I said about Newcastle. I think that they should have spent smarter and not put themselves in this position. They know the restrictions. So why have they spent and then, you know, hamstrung themselves by that spending? You know, they could have spent a little bit smarter with some of the deals that they ended up doing. So from my perspective, you look at Brighton as well. I do think Brighton are very fortunate to have found, you know, to have done the business they've done, which is excellent, but to have done it in the period that they've done it in. They've managed to, you know, the time in which Brighton have kind of arrived has happened during a period of time in the Premier League that suits what they're doing to an absolute T. So, yeah, but you're always going to get disagreements, you know. So it's as simple as that. Reese says, why are we having United fans stinking out the chat? Reese, I mean, if you're not comfortable with people of different backgrounds, people of different, you know, associations, I think that's more a you problem, mate. So anyone who is a fan of any other club is very much welcome in this chat box as long as they're respectful, which, to be fair to Luke, he always is. You know, if that stops for whatever reason, they'll be gone. We know the rules, but, you know, it's this whole idea about people being insulated, people only wanting people of their own, you know, creed. I don't get it. I don't like it, and I don't want it here, you know. So if you're not going to be welcoming to people that are in themselves welcoming and respectful, what's the point? You know, you got to deal with the fact that other people different to ourselves exist, that support different people, have different ideas, different beliefs, you know, and we've got to welcome them in. It's a bigger world out there, so be respectful to it. There's a lot of congratulations to John in the chat, who is going to be a granddad. Amazing stuff, John, and congratulations to you and the family. I hope it's doing well. Jabu says, honestly, I think Timber in midfield as a double pivot is a great bad idea. That's how we play. We need the solid at the back and focus on transition. Easy win. So is it a great idea or a bad idea or a great bad idea, Jabu? I'm a little confused. Ben says Victor Osimhen is a false image, to be honest. People aren't seeing that it takes him 4 chances to score. Someone's going to spend big money on him and find out. And I think the Osimhen argument is very simple. I think that the profile of a number 9 isn't what Arsenal are looking for right now. It's just not what Arsenal play with. Kai Havertz is, for me, the archetypal Mikel Arteta centre forward. A player that drops in, a player that collaborates, a forward that connects play, but a forward also that can hold the ball up well, hold players off. If only he had slightly better finishing, he could be perfect. But it is the finishing, of course, that I think is the crux of the Havertz issue right now. And until there's a better version or a better option available, Havertz is the best option for us right now. And I would start him over Osimhen because, and we talked about Erling Haaland and Thierry Henry on the show yesterday as well. And I feel as though, you know, Thierry for me is the better footballer. Haaland is the better goal scorer. in a team in which you have a side that scores goals from left to right through the midfield, you need a collaborator. You need somebody that connects play in your centre forward role. Thierry Henry, I think, sees the side of icons score more goals in it than a team that has Erling Haaland up top. He'll score more goals than Thierry Henry will, but I think the team overall will score more goals than the team of Haaland. And I think that's the same case for the team with Havertz in. If you put Havertz into this Arsenal team, I think the Arsenal team scores more goals. If Osimhen is in this Arsenal team, he might score more goals than Havertz, but I think the team overall doesn't score as many goals. And I think that's what's important to consider when you're thinking about the profile of centre forward that Arsenal go out and get. So that's where I kind of stand with the whole Havertz Osimhen thing in a nutshell. But there's further talk about it on that video that I recommend you go and check out. Corey says, why are people still unsold on Havertz? Is it because people are always going to compare him to Haaland? I've been a Havertz guy since the Bundesliga, and so I'm probably a bit biased. But come on, what more can he do? Well, the more that he can do is finish chances like we saw on Saturday. If he finishes that chance, he's an absolute hero. It's not going to silence the critics because sadly, there are people on this earth that will always hate Havertz, that will always criticize Havertz, that will always say that Havertz is not good enough. Despite the fact that he contributed 15 goal contributions in 13 starts, and I think now has contributed 18 goals in 15 games at centre forward, it's still not enough for people. And that's just the reality of people's view agendas around Havertz. It just is. That is just the reality of the situation with Havertz. Some people are never, ever, ever going to be convinced by it. It was a brilliant finish for the first goal. It gave me Pires against Aston Villa vibes, the little dink over the goalkeeper, and the touch to get him into the position to score that goal that he sadly cannot get the finish right for was brilliant. The way he got himself into that position. He created a chance for himself that I don't think many other centre forwards would be able to do like he did there. He also creates the chance for Saka that also I think should win us the game. And for me, I think he had a good match. And again, it's going to be sad to see him leave that centre forward role, but that's going to be needs must for me. It's needs must to move Havertz into midfield against Spurs and play Jesus up top, or play even Sterling up top if Jesus isn't fit yet. I think that is definitely something that needs to be looked at against Spurs because we don't have Rice. And I don't think I want to see Jorginho and Partey together. I don't think I want to see that. I don't think there's enough energy. I don't think there's enough progression. I don't think there's enough reliability. Havertz was excellent in midfield against both of Bayer Leverkusen and Liverpool in pre-season. And I kind of want to see it again. So for me, I think that's something to consider and something to look at. Messi Raf says, what's funny is if we signed a striker in January and had exactly the same numbers, people would likely be saying it's an excellent signing. And that's the funny thing, Raf. And you're absolutely right. If we'd have signed Osimhen and say he was only fit for the last 13 games of the season and he got 15 goal contributions, people were saying, oh, he's been a great success like that. And that's the reality. That is the naivety, the ignorance, I think, of football fans. And I conclude myself in that. We are biased. We are susceptible to it, and that's just the reality of the situation. Paul says, why don't fans recognize that player recruitment isn't just about the player's ability? The club also has a work rate, an ability to integrate the mindset of players and a willingness to learn. And you're absolutely right, Paul. It's not just about, I like this player, he scored loads of goals, let's sign him. That player has to fit. That player has to work in the team that we have obviously got. And I don't think that Osimhen does work and fit in this profile, in this model. And I think that we've got people behind the scenes at the club that have made plenty of very good decisions that if they felt that Osimhen was the right fit, they would have gone out and got him. Because the reality was that he was available during this window. Yes, the wages were significant, but if we'd have got him maybe slightly earlier, you probably would have been able to get him, and maybe he would have been convinced to come to Arsenal on a slightly lesser wage. Chelsea less so, because you're not in the Champions League, you're in the Conference League. But to come to a Champions League side like Arsenal, I think he would have been willing to take a pay cut to come here. But Arsenal felt that it's not the right choice. They felt that it's not the one to go for. And I have to lean on their example. I have to lean on their record. I have to lean on their recruitment strategy that has got us to where we are today. And so that's why it's a very easy thing for me to say Havertz would be a better pick than Osimhen. Kid says, people have an agenda against Havertz, and that's why. I said my apologies to him on the socials and proved me and many others wrong. Do we need another dynamic number 9? Yes. However, don't use it as a bashing stick. And this is the thing. At no point am I saying that Arsenal don't need to bring in a centre-forward. I think we do need another centre-forward. I don't think there was one in the market available in the summer that I really would have been convinced by. Even Šeško came with, question marks. He wouldn't have started for us, Šeško. He would have been brought in, started on the bench, and gradually worked his way into the team if indeed he was good enough. And we will continue to watch him this season. We will continue to see if he's going to be good enough for Leipzig to earn himself a move in the summer window of 2025. We will wait and see. But none of the strikers that were on the market really convinced me at all. Like Mr. says here, play Leao at false nine. Has Leao ever played false nine? When he was at Lille, he was a centre forward. At Milan, he's been playing on the left. Is he a false nine? I don't think so. So I think that that's the reality. That's where we're at, is you need to find the right players for the right positions. Magambo says, in social media, we overanalyze things. Only one stat is used to matter before social media. And now there are competitions and compilations for players and managers. And fans are more exposed. We talked about this with the Thierry Henry and the Erling Haaland debate. You know, we've been far more exposed as fans to Erling Haaland. We've been far more exposed to seeing Erling Haaland than we have Thierry Henry. So it's nearly impossible to compare eras. We were also talking about defenders. You know, has any Premier League defender been anywhere near as good as Van Dijk? Well, I think Arsenal fans would put a good argument, especially those that have been able to watch him through from the 80s through to the early 2000s, that Tony Adams is up there amongst the best centre-backs in Premier League history. But we weren't exposed, and we're not exposed to the clips, the compilations, the analysis of Adams in the same way that we've been exposed to the compilations of Van Dijk. So it's very difficult to compare and have kind of a judgment about those two. William Saliba, I think, is definitely going to be in with a shout if he stays at Arsenal for the next 5 to 10 years, becoming one of the best, if not the best, Premier League centre-half that we have maybe ever seen. That's how good he can be. But we're going to have to wait and see, and that's the reality of it. Baguma says, could you be kind to recap the injury status on Timber and Ødegaard? I reckon Havertz will drop back to 2 midfielders and Sterling will play in that false 9 position against Spurs. I also hold my hands up for the Nketiah deal. And you're not the only one who's needed to hold their hands up. I was going back over a few comments yesterday. I was just searching up the word Nketiah in the comment section on Saturday afternoon or Friday afternoon. We might have been on deadline day, actually, just to see how many people left comments like, can't believe Arsenal haven't accepted 15 million for whatever it was for Nketiah, because a lot of people need apologising to Edu for that deal. And fair play to Baguma. Obviously, we covered Timber. It's just a cramp issue. It's nothing serious. We don't actually have anything on Ødegaard at the moment specifically, but it just seemed like more impact injuries. But he was definitely playing through pain on Saturday afternoon, and that affected his performance. Ben says, I'm seeing Salah Edin on the bench. Are we seriously looking at untested teenagers to change the game against Spurs and City? It's worrying. It's worth obviously pointing out that at the moment that bench had lost Nelson, but had not yet included Raheem Sterling, so that's one player. It's obviously without Mikel Merino, of course, as well, who's injured. It's without Jesus, who's injured, and it's without Tomiyasu, who's injured. So it's missing a lot of players, Ben. So you have to point that out. That's why, obviously, some youth players. If you look at the Manchester City bench at the moment, they also have youth players on their bench. So it's not like it's just Arsenal when it comes to it's not just Arsenal when it comes to players that are teams that are, you know, at the top end of the table and having these players. Man United brought on Collier yesterday, you know, for his first Premier League start because of the reality of the situation. And on Man City's bench against West Ham, you know, they've got Nico O'Reilly and James McAtee on that bench. So, yeah, it's the same for most clubs, Ben, to see these young guys on the bench, even at the title challenging end of the table. And Salah's a decent player. I'm not sure he's going to make it at Arsenal, but he's a decent midfielder. Andrew says, keep Havertz up high and let him cause havoc. Need his dark arts against Spurs. Awonke says, people said this was a good window and now injuries have come to these players. We knew that we were injury prone. Again, like, obviously Sterling is not in the team yet. One of the signings that we made got injured immediately, so that's just really bad luck. So again, I don't think it's a case of we're sure the window wasn't necessarily good enough. I mean, Slim, who was on the show yesterday, was saying he thought it was a 10-10 window. I mean, I don't agree with that, but he felt that it was because obviously the state of the window and also because of what Arsenal needed and because of where Arsenal are as well. Maximir says, hi, Tom. Since we have got back some sanity after the Brighton game, can we critically analyse what might have Arteta done wrong and what in our areas of opportunity, considering the North London derby, subs is definitely one? I thought Arteta got the rest of the game absolutely spot on, Maximir. I'm a little bit surprised that you don't, and I'd be curious to know what you thought Arteta did wrong in the game against Brighton. Because from where I was looking, despite the fact, obviously, when we conceded, Calafiori was stripped and ready to come on the bench. Arteta had a decision to make at that point to either change, because you've just conceded, or, of course, throw on somebody like Martinelli, or stick with his guns and think, no, we need to bring on Calafiori, we need to tighten up the defence, and we need to make sure that we've got enough going forwards that we can still create chances. He stuck with the decision to bring on Calafiori. That proved to be the right decision because Arsenal created 2 opportunities that they should have scored from to win the game. So I don't know where the finger pointing at Arteta would be against Brighton, because that performance, both with 11 men and with 10 men, was good enough to win the game. So I'm struggling to see where we might point the finger at Arteta on Saturday. I think there are games where you can. The Aston Villa game at the end of last season, you can absolutely point the finger at Arteta for his substitutions or lack of substitutions in that game. But on Saturday, I don't see where you point the finger at Arteta. Personally, I don't see where you do that. Ben says, we've had good injury luck for 2 seasons. Things will even out. Arteta was talking about defensively injured players, but basically created this situation with weakening our midfield and 4 options with too many out. The reality is, though, the players that we let go of, the players that Arsenal let go of during the summer transfer window, are we really saying that we shouldn't have sold Nketiah, that we shouldn't have allowed Smith Rowe to leave, that we shouldn't have allowed Vieira to go on loan? What were those people bringing to the club? Smith Rowe, I love the guy. He's brilliant. He's great. But the fact of the matter is he weren't getting into this Arsenal team. He doesn't really fit the system. And he's played 500 minutes of football in 2 seasons. And we got £34 million for him. We've replaced him with Merino, who sadly is injured, right? He got injured and that sucks. And Nketiah is gone. We haven't brought in a centre forward. So I understand the frustrations there. Reece Nelson has gone, which again, questionable. But I think in reality, I've had time to digest that. He wanted out. He wanted out at the end of the window. I'm told very reliably it was very much him that was kind of the driving force in that loan move. And so Arsenal allowed it to happen, and they brought in Raheem Sterling on loan, who is, let's be honest, a significant upgrade on Reece Nelson. No matter what you think about Raheem Sterling and his issues over the last seasons at Chelsea, he's a much better player than Reece Nelson. So you've got in a better player. Ethan Nwaneri is going to get the minutes that Vieira has left. If I was to ask you the question, who this season would you rather give minutes to, Nwaneri or Vieira? It's an obvious answer. It's not the 24-year-old that's barely made a dent during his time at Arsenal. It's the 17-year-old that looks exceptionally exciting and has already done more in a pre-season than Vieira has perhaps done in his pre-season. I know Vieira scored against Bournemouth, but I've been overall more impressed by what I saw with Nwaneri in those performances in the summer. So Smith Rowe is replaced by Moreno. Vieira is replaced by Nwaneri. And Nketiah isn't replaced. Nelson is replaced by Sterling. The only player that's not replaced in this squad is Nketiah. It's the only one that we've not replaced in terms of a body. And that's because there simply was not a centre forward on the market that we felt it was worth going for. So for the next 4 months, and at least until January, we are going to have to deal with the fact of having one less centre forward. And when you've got Havertz and Jesus and Trossard, I think that'll be fine for the next 4 months. Havertz is in great form. He's got an excellent injury record, touch wood, and Jesus should be back soon as well. So I just don't think that the whole argument of we've created this situation ourselves. The only one you can point to is Nketiah. And then the question is who? Who are you replacing Nketiah with, realistically, in that last window? Because Osimhen isn't going to be that guy. Gyökeres isn't going to be that guy. They're not convinced by them. They don't think they're good enough. So that's the question you have to answer. That's the question that you have to answer. Merino did not replace El Neni, Ben. This idea that Merino replaced El Neni is BS. Miles Lewis-Skelly was on the bench yesterday. Another really exciting young player. Are you really telling me that you'd rather see El Neni play than the player that we saw in pre-season have an amazing half against Bayer Leverkusen in Miles Lewis-Skelly, who is playing at left-back but is by trade a midfielder? Saying Merino replaced El Neni is a cop-out. Absolute cop-out. I can tell you for a fact he replaced Smith Rowe. I know it from people at the club. He replaced Smith Rowe. Miles Lewis-Skelly replaces El Neni. If that's really a player that you thought was an integral part of the squad last season, and that's a really key area that you felt that we've lost depth in, El Neni wasn't even available for us the most of last season or the season before that. Miles Lewis-Skelly comes into that position. Moreno comes into Smith Rowe's position. Nwaneri comes into Vieira's position. Sterling comes into Nelson's position. The only player that we didn't replace is Nketiah. It's the only one. Only one that we didn't replace, and I understand the reasons as to why. It's as simple as that. Corey says, I find it funny how people are crying about players that we let go and didn't replace in their opinions. When was last season we had these players like Nelson? Those people were screaming for new attackers. And that's the thing. Like, people were claiming we have to get these players out. These players aren't good enough. We have to get them going. And then also, we're not going to sell Nketiah for 30 million. We'll be lucky to get 15 million for Nketiah. We're not going to get anywhere close to Ramsdale what we paid for him. But we have. We've done both those things. But we're not seeing any accountability, really, by some. We're seeing it, to be fair. Some people today have said, I hold my hands up. I got that wrong. But overall, no. Just no. Anyway, that brings us to an end of today's show. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your time. A couple of super chats before we go. Steeler says, the only way I forgive the transfer window is if Isaac is guaranteed next summer. And Temi says, slot proving Arteta is not replaceable, Tom. Let's see where we are come the end of the season, Temi, shall we? Make sure you drop a like on the video and help us to reach, of course, 1K every single day on the show. Thank you to the over 1,800 that are still watching this morning show despite the window closing. Thank you for making it a part of your morning routines. It is hugely appreciated. I'll be back with you, of course, bright and early tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, with all the latest Arsenal news across this international break. I need your help more than ever to help me through this next 2 weeks. And I'm going to do my best to help you through these next 2 weeks as well without Arsenal football. So make sure you tune in, make sure you drop a like and subscribe as well. And I will see you very soon. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.